Hello, everyone, and welcome to ObservabilityCON. My name's Raj Dutt, and I'm one of the co-founders and the CEO at Grafana Labs. So this is our inaugural ObservabilityCON event, and it's different than what we usually do every year at GrafanaCon, where we release a new major version of Grafana and talk about a wide variety of use cases that Grafana plays in. Not just observability, but things like business intelligence, Internet of Things, sensor data, people's home labs. Indeed, Grafana is used across an extremely wide array of use cases. But ObservabilityCon is really focused on the observability use case, which is something that's really important to Grafana Labs and something that we've been quite focused on for the last few years. So we're really excited about sharing some of the progress we've made on this use case in particular. So for all of you SREs, developers, operators, sysadmins, people in teams who are trying to run and manage your software and applications better and run and manage your internet infrastructure better, ObservabilityCon is a conference for you. Now, if you want to tag us on social media, here's the hashtag. Feel free to tweet, Instagram, or whatever your pleasure is. So similar to our last GrafanaCon, this conference is totally virtual for obvious reasons. We're live streaming it free of charge to thousands of people around the world. So wherever you are, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, but most of all, a very warm welcome from all of us. I think we've got a really cool event in store with 4 days of sessions, panels, Q&As, not just from Grafana Labs, but from all corners of the wider observability ecosystem. So this keynote is all about the Grafana observability vision, and you'll be hearing from 4 other Grafanistas. You'll be hearing from Torkel, one of our co-founders and the creator of Grafana, Tom, our VP of product and the co-creator of Cortex, and Cyril and Joe, 2 really talented software engineers here at Grafana Labs. So what are we going to cover today in the keynote? Well, we're going to start with the basics. What is observability and what our vision around observability is? We'll jump into Grafana itself, which is rapidly becoming the center of an open observability platform. And we'll also give you a sneak peek at some of the features in Grafana 7.3. We'll touch on metrics with a focus on Prometheus and Cortex, which are 2 popular open source projects that we're very involved with and try to help drive forward every day. We'll also hit logs with a focus on Loki, which is a log aggregation backend that we created a couple of years ago and is rapidly gaining popularity. And finally, we'll end with a special announcement, something I'm really excited about that we'll share with you at the end of this keynote. So stay tuned. So let's start with what observability actually is. And I can't really talk about observability without acknowledging the amount of hype that's involved with the topic. So observability is a relatively new word that's come into prominence in the lexicon just in the last few years. And in a way, it's an evolution of how we think about monitoring, but it's also very, very hyped. Every single vendor, ourselves included, whether you're approaching it for monitoring, APM, logs, traces, we're all trying to kind of get on the observability bandwagon because people really think about it as the new way, the better way to do monitoring for modern software and infrastructure. And speaking of hype, this is a relatively funny tweet by Cindy Sridharan, who's a distributed systems engineer and also wrote the book on observability, the O'Reilly book. And she says, overheard, observability, because developers don't like to do monitoring. We need to package it in new nomenclature to make it palatable and trendy. Well, to a certain degree, all tech is fashion, and I think there's a large element of truth to what Cindy's saying. But I also think that there's a legitimate sea change in how we are deploying and developing software and what it means for how we monitor that software. So in many ways, we feel that a new word and a new concept is necessary, hype aside. So let's start with the actual definition. Now, this goes back to the 1960s from control theory. So the definition of observability is to infer the internal states of a system from knowledge of its external outputs. The observability and controllability of a linear system are mathematical duals. I don't know about you, but that definition isn't super useful to me. And defining something by being a mathematical dual of something else doesn't really do it for me. So let's dive deeper and talk about some of the reasons why we've got this new word and what it means from where we've come. So hype aside, there's been several changes in the way that we develop, monitor, and deploy our software and internet infrastructure. The first is around complexity. 10 years ago, software was a lot simpler. We generally built monoliths, failure modes were known, and today we're building distributed systems, we're building microservices. The interactions between every component of our stack gets really complicated because there's so many of them. So it's really hard to understand the numerous and spectacular ways that our applications can fail. And volume of the data that we're collecting around our applications has also exploded. It's no longer the case. 10 years ago, we may have had an application deployed on a few servers sitting in a data center somewhere. Those servers evolved into maybe a few dozen or a few hundred virtual machines, then a few thousand containers. And again, with microservices and just the general complexity of software, the volume of data that we're collecting has gone through the roof. And then the variability of our infrastructure itself and the data has also exploded. Used to be the servers sitting in a rack in a data center would be pretty static. You'd order new servers, they'd take weeks to get shipped and deployed and racked and stacked and installed. Those servers would generally sit around for years. And with the advent of things like containers and Kubernetes and now serverless, our infrastructure is truly elastic. We're doing dynamic load balancing, we're doing auto scaling, and infrastructure is coming and going. Our primitives aren't sticking around for years, they're sticking around for hours, minutes. In the case of serverless, they're sticking around for seconds. So our infrastructure has become very variable and elastic. And finally, the velocity of the data that we collect has also skyrocketed. It used to be that we'd collect data every 10 minutes. That would be just fine. And now we're increasingly moving towards real time. In fact, most people want to collect data multiple times per minute, every 10 seconds or even more frequently. So all of these four things compound and require a paradigm shift in how we think about monitoring. And the fact is that failure modes are no longer understood in advance. Some failure modes still are. Of course, we want to monitor for things like, are we out of disk space? Have we run out of MySQL connections? Are we getting 500 server error logs? But if we solely rely on checks on the known knowns, it's not going to cut it anymore. In fact, monitoring has become a data analytics problem. That phrase was in our original investor deck from 2014, and I think it's even more true today. The reality is observability is really in the domain of the unknown unknown. With all these four trends, we need to make it a data analytics problem in order to successfully understand and troubleshoot our applications. And of course, I can't talk about known knowns and unknown unknowns without talking about Donald Rumsfeld, who used to be our Secretary of Defense here in the US. And he said this about the debacle that was the Iraq War about 2 decades ago. He said, there are known knowns, the things we know, and there are known unknowns. We know there are some things we don't know, but there are also unknown unknowns, the things we don't even know we don't know. And I think while he was much maligned for this statement at the time, that this is an interesting way to look at the various failure modes. Monitoring really skews towards the known knowns. And while that's still an important part in the modern observability stack, we're tending increasingly towards the unknown unknowns. And that's why monitoring is becoming a data analytics problem and why a new word and a new paradigm may be necessary. So when it comes to our vision for observability, it really boils down to a few key points. The first point is you need the right telemetry primitives. You want to have metrics as a core telemetry primitive. Metrics are super useful for getting an overview of your system, understanding aggregate throughput, error rates, latencies, queue lengths, Metrics are very efficient, and they're a core part of any observability solution. But metrics alone won't cut it. When you really want to understand what an actual problem was down to an individual user or an individual service, oftentimes you need logs or traces. And traces really come in distributed systems to understand down to the request level what's happening with a particular user. And when you combine metrics, logs, and traces, you're on your first step to having the core foundation of an observability platform. But it's not just about these three telemetry primitives. Just because you have metrics, logs, and traces doesn't mean you're done and doesn't mean you have an observability platform. It's about more than that. We think it's about creating an optimized and contextual experience that links all of these things together. And that's where Grafana comes in, and that's what the Grafana Labs observability vision is all about. So think about what an average SRE has to go through at 3 a.m. She gets paged over Slack or PagerDuty, and bleary-eyed, sleep-deprived, she has to potentially log into a whole bunch of systems. She has metrics, logs, and traces, but they may exist in disparate systems. So you may have to start with, say, Splunk for your logs. You may have to switch context to, say, New Relic to do some APM troubleshooting. You may have to switch context again and look at some individual traces in Jaeger. And this workflow is really suboptimal because each time you're having to relog in, you're having to switch context, you're having to transpose queries, you're having to find the same services, nodes, hosts, containers, you're having to zoom into the same time ranges. And it's just really, we think, an experience that deserves to be optimized. And that's a key part of what the Grafana Labs observability vision is all about. So we believe that you can use Grafana to create a workflow, a contextual workflow that allows you to seamlessly switch between metrics, logs, and traces to create a troubleshooting experience, a troubleshooting journey that links it all together in a really powerful way that feels almost magical. And the thing about Grafana is we are data source neutral. So there's a lot of vendors that have particular strengths. Some vendors may have a really strong metric story. Some vendors may be really good at logs. So Grafana is all about offering choice for each step and each component in that stack. And we want to create this experience that allows you to seamlessly switch back and forth between the telemetry primitives so that you can dive in and do data analytics essentially and help get to the bottom of those unknown unknowns. And that's what the core part of our vision is all about. So why should you care about observability? Well, ultimately, at a very high level, it enables better decisions and actions. And everyone, every organization, every team should care about that broadly. Now, this is John Boyd. He was a fighter pilot and a military strategist, a really deep thinker. Now, I love airplanes, so I love talking about him. People called him 40-second Boyd because he had a standing challenge that he could win a dogfight within 40 seconds, even if he started from a position of disadvantage. He also created this key concept called the OODA loop, which I think is relevant here. Now, there are 4 stages in the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide, and act. And I think this is applicable to almost any scenario, whether it's business, sports, or SREs. The faster you can go through this loop, and fighter pilots have to do it multiple times each second, the more competitive you will be regardless of your use case, regardless of what you're doing. And observe is the foundation and the first step of this loop. If you don't have a good observability strategy, you don't have the foundation for success. Now, more specifically, in the IT operations domain, we care about observability for a few other reasons. Everyone wants to build better software faster and more reliably. We're increasingly moving towards more agile methodologies. Many teams are already doing or striving to do things like continuous deployment. And in order to be successful at that, you need a really strong observability foundation. Otherwise, it's just off the table. In order to improve performance, improve user experience, and ultimately drive revenue and innovation, you need a strong observability foundation. Otherwise, you'll just be that first part of that loop won't be strong and you won't be successful. You also want to optimize your IT infrastructure, particularly with many teams, microservices. This can always get out of hand, often get out of hand. In order to control costs, control performance, understand bottlenecks, a really strong observability platform is key. And finally, one that we care about Grafana Labs a lot is fostering a data-driven culture. At Grafana, we really believe in breaking down silos and helping teams achieve this culture. And that's why we connect to so many different data sources. And fostering a data-driven culture has been one of the core missions of the open source Grafana project from day one. So with that segue, I'll leave you in the capable hands of our co-founder, Torkel Odegaard, who will chat a little bit more about latest happenings with Grafana itself. Thanks very much, and I'll see you later in the conference.
Thanks, Raj. I want to give you an update on Grafana and our kind of focus of building a composable observability platform, as well as give a shout out to a session later today with this. So before I begin, I want to introduce myself. My name is Torkel Odegaard. I'm one of the co-founders here at Grafana Labs, and Grafana itself started as an open source hobby project of mine, now over 7 years. So I've been working on Grafana for a very long time. It's been an incredible journey for me, but it's also been a really incredible journey for the project. Grafana started with as many open source projects with kind of a simple scratch my own itch kind of focus of building a better, for me it was building a better UI and query experience and dashboard experience for Graphite. But I quickly made a really impactful decision of making Grafana multi-data source. So I added a kind of abstraction layer for data sources and added support for InfluxDB. And with this data source abstraction, it was easy to add support for even more data sources. So we added support for OpenTSDB, and in 2015, we added support for Prometheus. Also a really significant decision to make Prometheus for built-in supported data source. And the list of data sources has grown, as has sort of the popularity of Grafana over the years. And you find now Grafana at the center of a big ecosystem of different tools and vendors in the observability space. And it's been really incredible also to partner with the big cloud vendors like Amazon, Microsoft, and Google to provide really solid data sources and integrations with their observability services. So earlier this year, we launched Grafana 7. This was a really impactful, sort of significant release and milestone for the project. It had a heavy focus on kind of improving the core, improving the platform by kind of moving features from data sources and panels and making them part of the platform and more unified and consistent. We introduced a new data model as well that kind of unified time series and table data, as well as a standardized data setting system and override system that can work consistently across all panels. We also introduced a new transformation feature that made it possible to have so any data source can have simple data transformations, and every panel can also access these data transformations. Before these things had to be kind of duplicated in data source plugins and in panel plugins. It also really empowered a lot of users that are stuck with data sources that have a very limited transformation data manipulation capability. So just using this feature then opened up a lot of doors for these users. And it's also kind of a feature that put Grafana on a different path of becoming more of a fully featured data analytics. We also invested heavily in making Grafana a plugin platform that is easy for us to kind of build more opinionated solutions on, as well as the community. But we did something else that was also really impactful in Grafana 7.0. And that was we added a missing element to the Grafana observability story. Super relevant for this conference. So as I mentioned, when Grafana started in 2014, it started with a kind of clear focus on metrics and time series. In 2019, that changed a bit with the addition of supporting logs in Grafana 6.0. So we had added a really custom logs exploration UI and workflow that allow you to kind of move seamlessly between your metrics and your logs in Explore. And in 7.0 earlier this year, we completed this kind of observability story of making tracing a first-class citizen. We also launched in 7.0 with 2 built-in data sources for traces with the Jaeger and Sipkin data source. And just a couple of weeks ago, we added support for our 3rd tracing data source with AWS X-Ray. And this kind of brings us, and another thing that we also did with traces was extend this kind of workflow of not being only able to navigate from your metrics to your logs, but also go from your logs to your traces. So if you have a trace ID in your logs, you can just click on the trace ID and open your logs, your trace view directly from there. So this brings us to kind of our view of a composable observability platform, where you, the user, can kind of pick the data source for metrics, logs, and traces that fit your need, giving you a lot more choice and freedom and kind of preventing you from vendor lock-in. But this doesn't prevent us from having a curated kind of preferred stack or curated observability stack on Grafana Cloud and Enterprise, where we sort of pre-install a Prometheus and Loki data source, for example, in cloud. But even though we have this curated and sort of preferred observability stack, it doesn't prevent you from adding your own preferred metrics data sources, logs data sources, and trace data sources. That's super important to highlight that we have a kind of a curated preferred stack, but we also have allow you to have all these options for all of these. If you want to know more about kind of recent developments in Grafana itself and how we build using the plugin architecture in Grafana, an easy start experience on Grafana Cloud, how our new enterprise data source plugins can gain you more context in the dashboard you're building, and how we're adding observability of Grafana itself with our new data source usage insights and auditing feature in Enterprise, check out the session we're doing later today. It's going to be full of demos and show some really kind of cool stuff. And before I hand over to Tom, I want to actually highlight one of those cool things we're going to show, a new feature in Grafana 7.3 that is out in beta right now, a new standard color option. So this is kind of building and continuing on the theme we added in Grafana 7, where we introduced these standardized data options. And this is a new standardized data option for color. Before in Grafana, you have been able to assign colors by kind of a palette, for example, in the graph and pie chart panels. Grafana will just pick a color based on the series index and assign that series a color. And the user then can override that color for each series. We also have a color sort of mode for thresholds that the gauge and stat panels are using, where you define static thresholds and kind of value ranges, and Grafana will use that color. So this is used for in the gauge panels, stat panels, and the table panel can also color the background based on these thresholds. But these, but there has been no standardized color option that work consistently across all panels, and that's kind of what we are introducing now in 7.3. So this standardized color option allows you to specify a single colors, allow you to specify that Grafana should use the thresholds to assign the color, or use a palette that is usually an option that you want to use for, say, a graph or a pie chart. But we also have these new continuous color schemes that allow Grafana to interpolate the color based on the min and max values. So these continuous color schemes comes in both multicolor and single color variants, and they can really turn a simple table panel into a heat map and allow you to distinguish a lot more sort of small value changes. And since this is a new standardized option, it will work consistently in all the new panels. Another thing to highlight is that these color modes are theme aware, so they will adapt a bit to the user preferences. If your user using the dark theme, a monochrome color will go from dark to the color you have selected. And if you're using the light theme, the same color option, the same dashboard will just look a little bit different. So it will go from light to the color you select. So they are all theme aware to make sure that your dashboards sort of look good for all your users, depending on no matter what color or theme they have selected. So check out Grafana 7.3. Check out the session later today. That's going to be full of demos. And now over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Torkel. So today I'd like to take a few minutes of your time to talk about metrics and more specifically Prometheus. Really, I want to talk mostly about the rise of Prometheus as a de facto standard for monitoring applications and infrastructure. And this is not just about the cloud native space where Prometheus is really popular. Prometheus is also used in a wide array of legacy applications and infrastructure, and is really, that's where it started. First off, I'd like to reveal some numbers about the usage of Prometheus in the wild. Numbers we gather from data reported by Grafana. Usually we do this at PromCon, but given the current situation, we weren't able to. So we're going to now. As you can see, over the last 4 years, Prometheus has been growing incredibly strongly. And last year, over 50% of Grafana instances had a Prometheus data source on average. So, drum roll please. This year we can see that it's almost every Grafana instance has a Prometheus data source. The rise of Prometheus has really been astronomical. But this is not the only data point in the rise of Prometheus and its domination. Recently, the CNCF did a survey of its end user community, asking them which observability tooling they're using. What it showed was that pretty much everyone's using Prometheus. I think 2/3 of respondents responded saying they were using Prometheus and Grafana together. The CNCF concluded that the most commonly adopted observability tools are open source, that there's not a lot of consolidation going on in this space, and that Prometheus and Grafana are used together. I think the survey provides a lot of evidence that the growth of Prometheus is being driven by the growth of Kubernetes. But I don't ever think I've seen a Kubernetes cluster without a Prometheus pod in it, basically. So the final data point I want to discuss is a little bit more controversial and maybe a little bit more anecdotal. In 2017 and 2018, we saw the likes of Influx and SignalFX, Wavefront, Datadog, all adding support for ingesting Prometheus metrics, be it via the remote write format or by scraping Prometheus metrics directly themselves. I think this was kind of the first step in these vendors kind of testing the water of the Prometheus community and really responding to their kind of customers' feedback that Prometheus was something they were using. What we've seen in the past year is lots of the same vendors adding support for PromQL itself. Really, I think this is customers telling them that not only do they want to instrument their code with Prometheus metrics, but they also want to query it using the Prometheus query language. I think customers and users want the dashboards and alerts that are available on the internet and written in PromQL. They want them to just work on whatever platform they're using. And I think this is also sending a signal that they don't want to learn proprietary vendor-specific query languages, and they don't want to get locked in. So the interesting thing here is that most of these implementations have shortfalls and incompatibilities. And I think some of them are also extending PromQL in a way that will kind of attempt to lock you back in again. What we're trying to do at Grafana Labs and with Grafana Cloud is give you a 100% compatible PromQL experience. And if there is anything extra you want in PromQL, we work with the upstream community, quite a few of which turn to work for Grafana Labs. We work with them to try and bring those features to Prometheus at the same time as bringing them to Grafana Cloud. This means that those features get better review and tend to be better designed, but it also means that you're not going to get locked in and that you'll be free to move off of Grafana Cloud. So these were just 3 data points on why I think Prometheus is really kind of dominant now and becoming a de facto standard. And it really begs the question, if you're not already using Prometheus, you probably should be. And what's stopping you? So some of the things that might be stopping you, potentially at least, could be solved by another CNCF project. This time Cortex, a project I started 4 years ago. Cortex aims to build a horizontally scalable version of Prometheus. And generally, the architecture we've built with Cortex is a little bit more sympathetic to the needs of large organizations. So in particular, Cortex is focused on the use case of monitoring multiple disparate locations around the world. Cortex allows you to aggregate metrics from all of these locations in a single central cluster, and then get that global view and query all those metrics in one place. Cortex is horizontally scalable, and what this means is it allows you to push all of the raw samples from all of your edge locations into this central location. Cortex aims to be 100% Prometheus compatible by using the same query engine as Prometheus. And this means you can point Grafana at it and use all the same PromQL queries and dashboards and alerts that work in any of your Prometheus clusters. You can use them with Cortex and with Grafana Cloud. Cortex also deals with replication, long-term storage, and multi-tenancy. And this really is aimed at allowing organizations to centralize not only their storage of metrics, but also the expertise involved with running and operating large Prometheus and Cortex deployments. Cortex had a hell of a year. Up until recently, if you've been running a Cortex cluster in production or in anger, you were probably one of the Cortex maintainers. That all changed when we hit the 1.0 release in April, really sending the message that Cortex is ready for more widespread adoption. We put a lot of time and effort into making it easier to get started with Cortex, into documentation, production alerts and dashboards and runbooks. I think all of this hard work was really rewarded in August when the CNCF's Technical Oversight Committee voted to move move from the sandbox into the incubation phase. This is a massive vote of confidence, and I thank them a lot. And then to cap off a really strong year, in September, Grafana Labs released Grafana Metrics Enterprise. This is our self-managed kind of enterprise distribution of Cortex, using all of the technology that we've built into Grafana Cloud and all the lessons we've learned from running Grafana Cloud. Grafana Metrics Enterprise, not only does it have a really cool logo, but it's basically baking in all of that expertise we've learned from running Cortex for 4 years, and all of the skills and extra little bits you need to centralize a Prometheus first monitoring strategy. We're focused with GME on solving problems associated with adopting Prometheus and Cortex in very large organizations. Some of the things we're doing, Cortex has really good, in the open source project, has best of breed kind of reliability and scalability. Sometimes it can be criticized for being a little bit hard to get started with. With GME, we've built a management UI and API, making it easier to get started and manage your cluster. We've been working with a lot of the early customers and found that they really want more control over who can access various different metrics and so on. So we've built a fine-grained access control method that's more flexible than Cortex's relatively coarse-grained multi-tenancy, that really gives you the control over who can access what metrics. We've also found customers need to honor data sovereignty, and they want to keep data in Europe or China, but still be able to query it globally. So we built cross-instance and cross-cluster query federation, using a lot of the query optimization framework in Cortex so that we can push the aggregations out to the edge clusters and really still give you fantastic performance. And at Grafana Labs, we also employ most of the Cortex maintainers. And this allows us to offer, I think, some of the best support and assistance possible. This is a brief screenshot of the UI for Grafana Metrics Enterprise. You can create new tenants, new access policies, new credentials, and we're really working to extend this with more features and functionality at the moment. Another thing we've built recently is the UI for managing Prometheus alert rules. This is something that ships as part of Grafana Cloud, and it ships with Grafana Metrics Enterprise. And it makes it really easy to kind of self-serve and make your own alert rules, see what's firing, edit them, silence them, and so on. We're really pleased to be able to bring the power of the Prometheus alerting system to more and more users. This has been a really short taste of what we've been up to in the metrics and Prometheus space. If this kind of thing interests you, I'd really encourage you to attend the session tomorrow with Marco, Jess, Teddy, and Alex, where they're going to have a lot more time to go into a lot more detail about the work they've been doing. So moving on, I would also like to spend a little bit of time talking to you about logs, and in particular about Loki. We released Loki, which is our log aggregation system, about 2 years ago, and hit the 1.0 milestone a year ago. For those who maybe aren't familiar with Loki, I wanted to give you a bit of a quick refresher on what it's about. So Loki and Grafana have always been focused on this developer and operator persona. With Loki, we wanted users to get to the error contained in the logs as quickly as possible. We allow you to quickly pivot from metrics to logs, showing you relevant logs and metrics for your query, and we wanted to make that as easy as possible. We do this by preserving the metadata and context you build up as you're querying your metrics, and then pivot that metadata directly over to your logs. This simplification and this integrated flow, I think, really helps de-stress the incident response workflow, which is what we were trying to achieve. The feedback and adoption of Loki has been incredibly strong over the past year. We've gone from about 5,000 active instances to over 27,000 active instances. These are just the ones we know of. We're pretty sure there are more out there. I'm really pleased to see this growth. It's really exciting to start a new project and see it grow so quickly. I wanted to give a shout out to the Loki team. I think they've been doing an absolutely fantastic job. But really, the Loki story is only just getting started. And today, I'm really excited to announce the 2.0 release of Loki. Building on everything we know and love about Loki 1.0, we've focused this release on 3 things: on getting metrics out of your logs, on building alerts off of those metrics, and building dashboards using them, building beautiful interactive dashboards. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Cyril. He's one of our Loki engineers, and he's going to show you all the new features and coolness. Over to you, Cyril.
Thank you, Tom. I'm really excited to show off all the great work that the Loki team has been putting into this new release, and I want to give a big shout out to the team. Before we start, I want to do a quick refresh on what is Loki and how it can help you. And for that, I'm going to use the classic use case of I'm on call, it's the middle of the night, I receive a page, and I'm looking at a dashboard like this. What I'm investigating, I'm looking at the database. It seems like this is a root cause of the issue. And so I can explore, drill down into a specific time range, and I can switch to Loki and find the logs of my application. So now there's a lot of logs. What I want to do is being able to filter them out, and I want to only see the errors. Right, and I can quickly find the problem and remediate to the problem and go back to bed. Loki also supports metric queries, pretty much like Prometheus queries, to count logs, which allows you to find the occurrence of the error. And also I can look in the 12-hour to see since when this is happening. It seems like this has been going on for a while now. And that's Loki so far. Now, I want to talk about the new features, and the first features I want to talk about is the extension that we made to the language. And to do that, I'm going to use the Nginx container, and we are actually running a lot of Nginx container at Grafana. We use Nginx as our Kubernetes ingresses. And I found out that getting metrics out of Nginx, it's not an easy task. It's actually very difficult. You can use Lua, but I'm not good at Lua. You can use an exporter, but that doesn't give you latency or nor rate of errors. And so you're really left with just your logs. And the logs are like this, right? So they are in JSON, and I'm going to use a new stage that is parser stage. So we support 3 different parsers: JSON, log format, and regex, depending on your type of logs. And parsers allow you to extract labels on the fly at query time. So we're going to use JSON and look at the result. Right, so if I look at the first line, for instance, I can see now that I have a ton of new labels that have been added to my line, and I can use them to filter, but also aggregate and create new metric query. So I'm going to use the status code, which is response upstream status code, and I'm going to show, for instance, everything that is not 200, right? Hopefully I have some. No, so I'm going to look back to 6 hour to find some. So I have some, and I can chain multiple of them, so I can ask for the one that the request method gets, for instance, and there we go. We have only 9 of them now, right? The problem now is that it's very difficult to digest this big blob of JSON. And what we can do with the new extension that we added is you can reformat the log line using those extracted label, which we're gonna do right now. And we're gonna output the status, right? Status, we're gonna put it right here, and then we're gonna output the method, and next to it the URI. Let's do the URI as last. Request URI, right? And now it's very much you know, light and easy to digest and to find, you know, the problems, right? So it's not about just logs, as I was saying. You can also extract new labels into metrics. And one particular one that I want to use is the latency. So I'm going to use the upstream latency. Where is the upstream latency? Yeah, response latency. Let's use that one. Okay. To use a label as a sample value, you need to use the unwrap operator. So unwrap, and then after you can aggregate using quantile, average, sum over time of this value. So I'm going to do a quantile over time. P99. All right. If there's any error, I don't want them, so I'm going to remove error. Error can happen if it's not a JSON label. I'm just being cautious here, and I want to do this over a 1 minute range, and I want to show that by cluster. Right. Let's look at this. Right. You see how fast that was, and I can quickly now found where there is a spike of latency, which allow me to reduce the time range. So here there is a spike, and I can go back to log, and I can use another filter, label filter, on the latency to find this exact log, because it's the P99, so I guess there's not a lot of them. And I'm gonna do 5 seconds, bigger than 5. Run that, and I can find the 4 request that was causing my P99 to be such value, right? So as you can see with this new extension, it's not just about logs now, but really building and getting metric out of your system, and system that were very difficult to get metric out of it. Another use case of those new extension is with alerts. So Loki 2.0 has now support for sophisticated Prometheus style alert. And this is really powerful combined with all the features that I've just shown, because it allows you to set rules, and Loki will evaluate them and forward them to Alert Manager. So I'm gonna use the Grafana Cloud alerting UI to add a new alert to show you this. So we're gonna add a new alert, a new Loki alert. We're gonna call it Nginx error. To make sure it fire, I'm gonna use 200 here. I'm sure there's a lot of 200 here. And I'm gonna say bigger than 1. All right. And then we're gonna set some labels. So this is the same as you were using with Prometheus, the same rules syntax. Severity, I'm gonna say test, so I don't page anyone. Annotation, and I'm gonna add a summary, and I can use the template, same kind of template. In Nginx receives 200. And I can add information about the label. All right. And we're gonna save, finish editing. And while this is updating, I'm gonna show a nice dashboard that I built using only the new extension of LogQL. And this is only using Loki, and this is showing how you can get metric out of Nginx now using just the logs. So you can see I have the average latency by cluster. I can even select just a single cluster if I want. I can see the rate of 500 here at the top, which is not too high. I have the latency, which is the P99 and the median per cluster. I have the request per status, the request rate. And at the bottom, which I found it very nice, so I use a template here, but I'm showing you only the slow and the errors. And I added intentionally the error keyword here to make sure it's in red, so you can see the slow and the error very quickly and find the problems, right? So let's look at the Nginx one, and it's firing, as you can see, and we can look in detail how it's firing, and we can see the severity here, and I forgot to set the label cluster anyway. So yeah, this is Loki 2.0, at least a small glimpse, and back to you, Tom. Thank you.
Thanks, Cyril. That was awesome. It's great to see all the new features and the project develop and expand to encompass new use cases. Really exciting. If you want to find out more about Loki 2.0, I encourage you to go to this talk on Wednesday, where Ed, Jimena, and Christine will talk a lot about the work we're doing with logs and log aggregation at Grafana Labs. That pretty much wraps it up for today. But there is one more thing, and I've always wanted to say that. Today, I'm really pleased to introduce Joe, who's been working on tracing at Grafana Labs for over a year now. He's got something pretty cool to show you, but I won't spoil his surprise. So over to you, Joe.
Thanks, Tom. So I don't think it's any secret that at Grafana we have been using distributed tracing for years to better understand requests as they pass through our system, to diagnose queries with high latency, to figure out issues that maybe only occur in production, intermittent issues that we can't reproduce, maybe just to better understand how a query passes through our system so we can write better software. But at the beginning of this year, Tom challenged me to do something new. He challenged me to sample 100% of our query path, of our read path. And existing open source solutions require complex and difficult to operate backends like Cassandra or Elasticsearch. And at the time, we were sampling something like 10 to 15,000 spans a second. And I was starting to figure out about how large of a Cassandra cluster would it take to store our full read path. Unfortunately, in time, in cost, CPU, memory, or even just like hosting costs, this is going to be extremely expensive. And so instead, we went down a different path. Instead, we made Grafana Tempo. I'm excited, very excited to talk about this application. We've been working on it for months. We've been using it for months at Grafana, and I'm proud and excited to say we met Tom's challenge, and today we are sampling 170,000 spans per second in Tempo. 100% of our read path from development, staging, and production is all in Tempo, round the clock, 24 hours a day, 170,000 spans a second. Tempo already natively supports existing open source instrumentation, Zipkin, Jaeger, OpenTelemetry, OpenTracing. It's built on OpenTelemetry standards and protocols. And it uses only object storage, GCS and S3, no complex backends. So we're batching up our traces, we're putting them into these blocks, and we're shoving them into GCS, and it's extremely cost effective. It is a minimal dependency, high volume tracing backend. And we visualize all this through Grafana, of course. Where else would you visualize it? But there is one small caveat. There's one small catch, and that catch is that Tempo is a trace ID only store. You can only ask for traces by ID. Okay, so we have this store. It's trace ID only, but Grafana's been using it for months. How? Here, let me show you. So this is a Loki query, and this Loki query is hitting this kind of example application that we're using often to show the various instrumentation at Grafana. And I'm asking for this simple query, which just asks for all of the log lines from a specific application, and I can jump directly from any of these log lines to Tempo. Now, this is not new. We've shown this before. In fact, this is called Loki-derived fields, and this has been in Grafana for months now. I can't even remember. 7.0 maybe been the first version that it was included in. But this ability to link a log to a trace, while kind of maybe seemingly simple, is extremely powerful, and it is the method that Grafana has been using to index our traces for months and months now. This log line is so powerful because I can put anything I want in this log line. For instance, HTTP method, status, status code, path, latency. We could put maybe specific fields that are meaningful to myself as a developer, to my application, to my team, to my part of the organization, and I can index traces in the ways that make sense to me. So right here I have this log line with the trace ID. If I include anything else I want, I can now search for traces by anything else I want. This is the way we've been searching for traces for months and is the only way to find traces right now at Grafana. Additionally, this leverages all of the money and the time that you have spent already on your logging backend, all of the training. Your developers already know how to log and how to search for logs. Add a trace ID, and all of that is now leveraged to also search for traces as well. But like I said, none of this is new. We've had derived fields for a while. We've had the ability to link from a log line to a trace ID for a while, and we've been using it for a long time, and all of this is new and public. So let me show you something that is new. Let me do a simple query. This, for those of you who are familiar with Prometheus, this is a simple histogram query. It's going to bring back the P99 of a specific metric, and this is just going to be the latency on the same application that we were looking at a second ago, this kind of like example or test application. So the new thing here, the cool thing, is these dots. These dots are exemplars. So every one of these dots represents an example of the metric that I've just requested. So each of these dots, for instance, let me grab this guy right here, is going to let us link directly to a trace that contributed to the line that we're looking at. So if I look over here, I can see, okay, here's the trace. Here is a request that was aggregated in order to create that metric. Well, okay, that was a kind of a normal one. Let's look for a high latency one. So we're having some issues in production. We're having a latency event, and we want to see why. Well, we have our dashboards, we have our metrics. Now we can jump directly to an example of why. We can see exactly an exact request that contributed to the high latency or error event that we're seeing right now. Let me further improve this. Status code equals 500. So no surprises here. Metricing by status code is not new or interesting, but being able to write a metrics query and then having all of these examples of those queries that directly contributed to this query is new. Here we go. Here's an error. I'm now looking at a query that I know errored, that I know it contributed to that Prometheus metric I was just querying a second ago in Grafana Explorer. Additionally, another new exciting thing is the ability through this consistent metadata that we're pushing to jump directly to the logs that helped create this problem. So this application had an error. Let's go straight now to the logs of the application that had that error. Here I can see a log line. It's telling me what's going on. This is an exact process or pod or application that contributed to or that the error occurred in. So, you have your application, you have 10 instances or 100 instances or whatever of your application, and a query hits your backend, and it passes through one of these. So one of them serves them, and then it fails. And you can now go from a query that shows the failures, the failure rate, the latency of those failures, directly to an exact example of one of those failures, directly to the exact logs from one of the processes that created those failures, and you can immediately begin to understand, what is occurring, why is this a problem. This triage flow is extremely powerful. My operator wakes up, they write a request, and they are seeing, or they're looking at a dashboard and they see their error spike, they see their latency spike. They can now see an exact example of that spike and see immediately, within seconds, the logs that came from the process that failed. So if this were isolated to a certain set of processes, they could immediately begin understanding what was occurring. Um, so tempo. Tempo, this is the vision of tempo. This operator, when they found their exemplar, when they used their log lines to index their traces, was able to click on a trace and with confidence know that they could find that trace. The questions that kept coming up were things like, um, a customer had a latency issue. This query was slow. I need to see that exact trace. I need to know that's in my backend. We saw that error that we only see once a week and we don't know what it is, and it came up that again. We need to see that trace. We want to know exactly what happened. Was it sampled? Was it not sampled? Tempo changes this. Tempo allows you to know that everything is sampled. 170,000 spans a second. The entirety of our read path exists in our backend. So when we do these log queries, when we look at exemplars, every click is going to reveal the trace we are looking for. Your custom index that you built with your log line, you're going to search for, you're going to dig in there, you're going to find the query, and you're going to know when you click that Tempo has it. This is what Tempo brings. This is the new way to do tracing. Excited to announce Tempo. Excited to announce a free beta coming very soon. Go to your Grafana Cloud portal, jump in there, and you can see that there's a new link there. You can send us contact information, and we are excited to get back to you and in the very near future offer a free beta for Tempo. If you do not have a Grafana Cloud account, it's free to set up, so please go do that as well. And then you can participate in using Tempo, getting to understand it, and understanding how powerful it is to log what you need to log to find the traces you need to find. Finally, let's get in touch. Jump in Grafana Slack. Hang out with me. Talk about Tempo. The Grafana Tempo repo that was just open sourced in this keynote, which is exciting. Jump in there. Let's make some issues. Make some requests. Let's do some PRs. And then there's a few Google groups here. Tempo announced. Tempo users, great ways to stay up to date with what's happening with Tempo. Please get in touch and let's make something cool together. Also, on Wednesday, there's a tracing session. So if any of this is interesting to you, if you are interested in 100% sampling, if you are interested in these new patterns created by Grafana, please jump into this tracing session. Everything I talked about is going to go into detail. We're going to talk specific examples, more examples, and you're going to see from some of our experts exactly how we're doing a lot of the things that I very quickly went over today. Thank you all so much for joining. I hope you have a great conference. I have been holding this, I've been having this secret for months, and I am so excited to have shared it with you all. Please, Tom, take it away. Let's finish this up.
Thank you, Joe. That's really cool. I'm super excited to open up this new chapter in Grafana Labs' journey, and really excited to get into the tracing space. In my 2019 keynote at KubeCon, I predicted that we'd be able to correlate metrics, logs, and traces, and more easily combine these different sources of data into a debugging and incident response flow. And I think with the announcement of exemplars and Tempo and Loki 2.0 today, you can really see how we're starting to flesh out that picture. First, with Loki 1.0, we made it easy to pivot from metrics to logs. Then with Grafana 7, we introduced the idea of making it easy to go from logs to traces. And then finally today, with both Tempo, Loki 2.0 and exemplars, I think we're really kind of rounding this out and making it possible to utilize all three of these data sources in a single kind of incident response flow or debugging workflow. I'm really proud of the platform of projects we've developed at Grafana Labs. These are the projects that I want to use as a software engineer. Open source first, integrated but still composable, and scalable yet easy to use. I can't wait to see what we do next. If any of this has piqued your interest, please do come and join us on Slack. We'll be hanging around there and free to chat. And enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for real-time observability with Redis and Grafana. My name is Mikhail Volkov, and I'm a customer success manager at Redis Labs and one of the developers for Redis plugins.
And one more time, hello everyone. My name is Alexey Smolyany. I'm customer success lead at Redis Labs, and I work with Grafana 3 last years and have integrated it with different SQL and NoSQL data sources to implement various monitoring cases, KPI dashboards, capacity analytics, and real-life scenarios.
In this presentation, we are going to talk about integration of Grafana and Redis, the most loved in-memory database. We will present 3 real-life applications built with Redis data source for Grafana. We will talk how to use Redis data source, demonstrate the new application plugin with custom panels and dashboards. Also, we will touch the new features of Grafana 7, data frames, transformations, and streaming.
During the presentation, please send us all your questions, and we will be happy to answer them after the end of the session. Let's start.
Hello, Alexey.
Hello, Mikhail.
How's it going?
Very well. I'm calling you to talk about real-time observability in Grafana. Although I'd rather discuss this topic in person, but I can't because of coronavirus. So my first question to you, what will you do first when the restrictions are lifted?
I would like to have a Redis Labs party and see all of the new faces in the company. Remember the sales kickoff we did in Vegas and had the team building activities? I want to do it again.
Me too. Where do you think we should host our future party?
Let's take a look at the COVID-19 travel map and find the best location.
This is our COVID-19 travel map. We created this little project to check how the data, which is stored in Redis and Redis time series, can be displayed on a map. You can see the dynamics of the coronavirus cases growth, where they're still growing and where the curve is becoming flat already. Besides the standard graph representation, the data is also drawn on the map.
What is a Redis time series and how did you display Redis time series on the Grafana world map panel?
Redis time series is an open source Redis module adding a time series data structure to Redis. It supports high volume inserts, low latency reads, query by start time and end time, aggregated queries, and other features which you can see on this slide. You can display the Redis time series value on the Grafana world map panel with the new transformation mechanism introduced in Grafana 7. One of the available transformation named labels to fields, and it will convert the labels of time series into the table format. And then you just need to change parameter location data of the world map panel to table mode and map the relevant fields. Among other labels, each time series has the label geohash to link the time series value to the relevant point on the map.
It's impressive what you can do with the new transformation in Grafana 7. But I'm in California and you're in New Jersey. The numbers in our state don't look very good. Let's meet somewhere in the middle. It looks more safe.
Agree, but winter is coming. What about the weather? Can we check that?
Yes, we can try to use the Open Weather Map API to get the current weather, forecast for our upcoming party, and load the data to our favorite Redis time series and display it on the Grafana dashboard.
Indeed. And I have a dashboard already. It shows the current conditions for location. I also created weather rules for different types of the outdoor activities: landscape photography, biking, hiking, rock climbing, and others. And dashboard also displays the period of time good for the particular activity at the particular location. Grafana gives me a lot of options to visually highlight the data, display low and high zones for temperature, dangerous zones for wind speed, even draw the darker sky when the cloudiness is severe, and mark periods of daytime and nighttime. You can draw a few series on the same graph, so you can easily compare temperature or wind, for instance, in the different places. And you can do it with current conditions or future forecast.
The forecast looks chilly. I donated all my winter clothes when I moved to California. I have only shorts and flip-flops, so I should buy something warm to travel.
I heard about pop-up store, which sells winter coats. Although They made only 10,000 items and they're going to sell them out in 10 minutes. We have to hurry up.
How we can see if there is still one available for me?
We can observe it on their website, and it looks like they use Grafana too.
I heard that they are using Redis streams along with Redis gears at the backend. Redis gears is a dynamic framework that lets developers write and execute functions that implement data flow in Redis. Redis gears support several types of readers that operate on a different types of input data, including Redis streams introduced in Redis 5.0. Looks like I'm lucky. Codes are setting quick. I have to hurry up.
How can you watch stream messages? Can you explain the data flow?
To watch stream messages from Node.js client, you can use Stream Reader in the event mode in Redis database. In this mode, the reader is executed in response to events generated by new messages added to the stream. This is the function to create time series used to store the number of incoming messages and the queue size samples. And as we already saw, time series can be easily visualized in Grafana using Redis data source. Stream Reader accepts multiple arguments that control how it is triggered. In our case, we want the trigger to be triggered every 5 seconds or after it receives 10,000 messages. The last option, trim stream, specify not to trim the stream after execution for further processing.
You said that Redis time series can be visualized with Redis data source. Can you please share some details about it?
Redis data source is a Grafana plugin based on a new backend platform introduced in Grafana 7. Redis database does not provide an HTTP interface, and you cannot use Grafana HTTP data sources to interact with Redis. We developed the data source plugin providing this functionality. It allows you to visualize Redis time series data and core Redis data types like strings, hashes, sets, and more.
Is the installation requires a lot of time?
Installation is as easy as any other Grafana plugin registered in the repository. You can do it using standard Grafana CLI command, or if you don't have a Grafana installed or just want to try the new data source, you can easily get started with Grafana in a Docker container.
Once plugin added to Grafana, you will need to configure access to your database. It supports Redis cluster, Sentinel, and standalone instances with passwords, TLS, and ACL access.
After you complete the initial configuration, you can start to create panels displaying Redis data. The Redis data source plugin supports 3 different command types: Redis commands, Redis time series, and universal inputs. The first type is Redis commands, comprise a number of predefined commands to retrieve core Redis data types, such as hashes, sets, strings, and strings. The command output is pre-formatted for easy use in the Grafana interface.
The second type is Redis time series commands, offer an interface to let you work with the Redis time series module. Currently, it supports various commands which let you query a range from 1 or more time series. This example shows you the number of the downloads of the Redis data source from the Grafana repository.
And third, the universal input allows you to use other commands not supported by the first 2 modes. We'll talk about this mode later in the demo.
Also, you can execute Redis admin commands, info, slow log get, and client list. Their output comes in newly introduced data frames, so you can apply Grafana transformations to modify the standard output.
Redis data source provides an out-of-the-box predefined dashboards to observe Redis database, but also lets you build customized dashboards tuned to your specific needs.
Wait a minute. Is it possible to see the dynamic of operations per second, client connections, or network throughput changes using the data source?
Yes, it's possible. Have you heard about Grafana streaming capabilities?
I know it's another new feature introduced in Grafana 7, but I don't know the details about it.
Correct. Grafana uses RxJS to continuously send data from a data source to panel visualization. All the work is done on the React frontend. The Go backend may not know that the data is used for streaming unless data should be returned in a different format.
Do you need any storage to keep the data?
The data displayed on the panel is stored in memory.
Can data source support streaming and non-streaming data?
To keep the existing functionality of the Redis data source and add streaming capabilities, we added the streaming option with 2 parameters to the query editor: streaming interval in milliseconds and a capacity. Values will be constantly added and will never exceed the given capacity. If you enable refresh on the dashboard or refresh the browser window, the data will be gone and the panels will start to collect data again.
If I have multiple Redis databases, how I can see the status and what kind of Redis module they installed?
We recently introduced a Redis application plugin, which can display all configured Redis data sources on the custom page and shows the status and available Redis modules.
Oh, I see a lot of modules here. Gears, search, time series. Do you support them all?
Yes, and you know what's funny? When you see red, then the database is available, while gray means that we cannot connect to it and check the status.
Wait. What is the application plugin? Is it something different than the data source?
Application plugin allows developers to create custom pages like this one and bundle panels and data sources in the same package.
Which panel did you create already?
The first panel we introduced is the Redis CLI panel.
Redis CLI? Would you like to say I can interactively execute Redis CLI commands from Grafana?
Yes, Redis CLI panel allows you to manipulate data, configure the database, and see instant feedback on your dashboard. You can create dashboards for everything, and sometimes you need more information than dashboard provides. Switching to another application takes time and additional resources. So using already configured data source, you can stay in Grafana and interact with your database and request any data you're interested in. Let me demonstrate you. In this demo, I'm going to show you how to configure Redis data source and application plugin. We will see pop-up store and we'll discuss how to use dashboard variables with Redis datasets. As you can see, there are 2 plugins available: Redis application and Redis data source. Let's go to configuration, plugins, type red, and enable Redis application. You'll be redirected to the home page. Let's click Add Redis data source. To create new Redis data source, you have to specify name, choose the type, standalone, cluster, sentinel, socket, and provide the address. I'm going to use local Docker container, host docker internal 6379. You can provide ACL username with the password, increase pool size, change advanced configuration, and enable TLS client authentication if required. Click Save and Test. As you can see, data source is working as expected. Let's go back to Redis application, which has 2 dashboards, Redis Overview and Redis CLI. Let's take a look at Redis Overview, which we demonstrated before. It provides you information about the network, memory, client connections, common statistics, and the cluster configuration if it's enabled. Now let's take a look at Redis CLI. It has various streaming panels, and you can see it's already started to stream the data for operation per second, number of clients, memory, and the network. Let's take a look at Redis CLI. Let's type info command and get the information and statistics about the server. Now let's take a look at how many keys do we have in the database and type scan 0. And you can see there is no keys in the database. Now let's take a look at Redis pop-up store. Let's choose Discord and let's choose pop-up store. It has various panels which provide you different information about the process. Let's start the script. And you can see the data started to populate and Redis gears started to process orders from the clients. Redis gears create time series which displayed on the graphs. Let's add the new panel. Click Add New Panel. Let's name it Redis CLI. Choose Redis data source. As a type, we are going to choose command line interface. And as a command, you can choose pin command. Run and switch to table view. and you can see the response. Let's choose Redis CLI and click apply. Now you have to move it to the right place. Now you can have Redis CLI panel added to this process. Now let's take a look how many keys do you use for this demo. Let's use the same scan command, and you see there are multiple time series, product, and strings. Because we are using time series, let's take a look at the information for one of the time series. Let's copy name of this key and use ts info command. Provide the key, and immediately you can see the chunk size, timestamp for this command, memory usage, and how many samples do you have in this time series. Also, we're using Redis gears. So let's type Redis gears dot, and you can see all the commands for this module. Let's put rg dump registrations to see all the triggers which we are using for this demonstration. And one of the triggers we are using with this session ID, you can see that it's run in async mode. It's triggered 1900 times. There was 0 failures so far and no errors found. And this is the Redis pop-up store. Let's take a look at our third example for dashboard variables. This dashboard has 2 variables, region and a country, and both of them use Redis sets. Redis set is it's an ordered collection of strings. All of them are unique, and you can run multiple commands like unions, intersections, and difference. Let's populate our regions with Americas, Europe, and Asia. Let's use Redis CLI. As you can see, request is free. Let's add America. With the countries, let's add Asia. And let's add Europe. Now, when the data populated in the key, we can use scan 0, and you immediately can see these keys. Let's use sunion command. And now you can see the countries in both America and Europe. Let's take a look how variables configured. Let's go to configuration, settings, and variables. As you can see, first variable region, it uses members command with the regions key. Second variable, use Lua script, which use sunion command and use a region variable with a single quote option. What is Lua script? Lua is a compact language which could be embedded in other applications like Redis, and it's allow you to create scripted extension to the Redis database. Why we use Lua script for this variable? Because let's save it and refresh. So now you can see that region populated. When you choose 2 regions, Europe and America, you want to see all the countries populated in this variable from both of these regions. And then you can use these variables for your repeat panels. Unfortunately, when you choose multiple values and sunion command expect these values with space, there is no option to do that. Which is why we use a special single quote option, which provide us values with space, with a comma, and we use Redis call Lua command for sunion to combine with data and get the proper output. If you want to try that, let's copy this eval command, put it in the Redis CLI, and you can see the output. And as you can see, it works here in the countries as well. Instead of Lua, which has its limitation, we can use Redis gears. And this is the command how you can create the trigger sunion, which accept multiple options, and then you can execute it to get the same.
Now we're almost done. In this presentation, we talked about integration of Grafana and Redis database. We showed you 3 real-life applications built with Redis data source for Grafana. We explained how to work with Redis data source. We touched the new features of Grafana 7, data frames, transformations, and streaming. We demonstrated the new application plugin with custom panel and dashboards. We even unveiled the new interactive way to work with your data from Grafana, not only observe, but control your data with Redis CLI Grafana panel.
To learn more about Redis data source and new Redis application plugin, We would like to share links to all projects which we discussed during this presentation. Also, we published a series of blog posts on Redis Labs technical blog, talking about Redis data source, how to use it, and presented our COVID-19, weather, and pop-up store demo projects.
We love to hear from users, developers, and the whole community. Feel free to ask a question, request a new feature, or report bug with GitHub issues. And don't forget to start the repository to show your support.
And if you have your own idea what else you can do in Grafana with Redis data source, start your project and let us know.
If you'd like to speak with us after the end of this conference, you can find us on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Grafana Slack.
Thank you very much. And now we are open questions and answer session. See you there.
Okay, hello everybody again. Now it's not pre-recorded hello, it's a live hello. And myself, Alexey Smolyan, and Mikhail will observe the questions which were asked during the presentation and answer them. The first question from anonymous user is about, are there any limitation with the Redis data source? Does it work with all Grafana panels? The output of Redis data source comes in the standard Grafana data frames, which means that every panel which can handle data frame can correctly display the result of the query. So we explicitly tested it with all standard Grafana panels, a graph, single stat, table. We also tested it with the world map panel, as you see it on the demo. So we believe maybe not all, but most of the panels should support output of a plugin correctly. Next question, Mikhail, please.
Yes, I want to add for the first one, it's provided with data frames, but using the transformation, which was introduced and we talked in this session, you can actually transform your data, right? And then get into the format you will need for a particular panel. And this is the way you probably can display it. Next question is about Redis exporter. With Redis data source, it's directly connect to your Redis database using Radix Golang client. So we don't use any Radix exporter or any other adapters or tools. It's direct connection. It gets the data from the client, transform it, and then it will visualize it on your panels. Next.
Okay, there are two questions which not duplicate each other, but about a similar. Tejaswini asking, can we compare Redis time series DB with Influx, Timescale, and Elastic? And also second question here, do you have any insights on what application use cases are better for Redis compared to something like Influx? Of course, such comparison would be probably the topic of the separate meeting and the separate conference, because it's big and we cannot observe it just in a couple of minutes. If you have some specific questions about some specific use case, I would like to invite you to Grafana ObservabilityCON Slack channel so we can discuss it in details. Briefly, I would like to say that our Grafana plugin supports not only Redis time series DB type, but we also support the other types of the regular Redis database, which is strings, lists, hashes, and others. So which gives you much bigger flexibility, and you can display not only time series cases, but you also display other cases which are not relevant to time series. And Mikhail showed that you can connect some, for example, gears and adding more flexibility here as well. This is quick answer on the question. And as I said, if you'd like to know some details, or some very side-by-side comparison, let's discuss offline in Slack channel.
Right, thank you, Alexey. The next question is, can the Redis data source be used for Redis PubSub? We don't have any commands specific for PubSub in the plugin yet, but using the CLI, you can try to use them and get the output, I hope, and use the transformation to format them if possible. If not, you're welcome to open the issues on our GitHub page. So submit what kind of command you need, what kind of report you're looking for, use what kind of panels, and then we will add it into one of the future version publish it, and you're welcome to use it.
Okay, thank you,
Next.
Mikhail. The next question, is Redis time series commands and Grafana commands are in line with PromQL? Today, not. We either provide you some wrappers for Redis data, or you can, as Mikhail showed in his demo, you can just type Redis command and get the data. In future, however, we plan to start to support PromQL. The only thing, unfortunately, I cannot promise you the particular day and time when it happened, but Mikhail and I will work to be more compatible with PromQL.
Thank you, Alexei. Next question I want to address is will be in future PromSQL support for Elasticsearch by Ramon? So with data source, it can connect to any Redis database in Redis Labs, Azure, any cloud provider, AWS. Should be Elasticsearch as well. I haven't tried it myself, but should be possible. If there will be a feature request to support Elasticsearch, we can definitely do that. Please submit the issue. We'll look into that. And if it's easy to do, we can implement that in future version. Next, Alexei.
Okay, can it be click push button to paste all content and the user can just enter or tweak plus enter in CLI? Mikhail, you'd rather answer this question, please, as author of CLI panel.
All content and user. Right. I just want to say that with Redis CLI, it's a new idea. It's nothing. It wasn't with command line tools in a panel. It's not. It's something which was not implemented in Grafana yet, right? And this idea was created because I wanted to have. I always, when I work with Redis database and the panels, I always missing something. Which is why I wanted to run different commands, see the keys, maybe flush DB if I wanted to start from scratch. When I play with streaming, I want to see if I can populate the time series data and see it immediately on my dashboards. So with Redis CLI, it's still in development. It's not ready yet. And as you saw, it's showing you data in the raw mode, which is a little bit different what Redis CLI provides. So we are looking for the feedback. If it's something you want to improve, like with copy paste, something is not working for you, just open the issues. We'll look into that. Or you're welcome to submit your own pull request, and we will see that. I will probably approve it if it's great. We will add it and we'll publish it in a new version. But with this session, we are really looking for your feedback. Is already CLI something you would want to use inside the Grafana? I think it's very interesting. It's use case. Next, Alexei.
Okay, thank you, Mikhail. Is it secure when we run the Redis command on the dashboard? And does it support the Redis cluster? The security of Redis commands defined by administrator on the level of the Redis database. We support all standard security features of open source and Redis Enterprise, which means that you can set up TLS access, you can use password for database, and you can use ACL if you're running on the Redis 6, you can use ACL functionality. And everything you can set up from plugin configuration screen, and you use this for your security. And the second part of the question, if we support the Redis cluster, yes, we do. Mikhail, the next question.
Right. There are a couple of questions. I want to address this one. Is JSON output format user-friendly? I was curious about CLI or human being friendly and machine friendly output formats. As Redis support JSON and any other formats of the data with the modules, and there is the AI modules, many different kind of the formats. So, and we haven't tested all of them because Redis CLI is still new. You have to experiment by yourself, see what works, what is not working. If you need to improve something, please submit issue. We'll look into that. And as I mentioned before, now it's supported on the raw format. If there is any user-friendly format we'll need to support in future, maybe use one of the Monaco code editor to make it easy to understand. We can implement that as well. And this is something we're actually looking forward to use Monaco code editor used by Grafana.
Okay, unfortunately, we need to hand over this scene to next presenters. And the last question about the parameters and collecting of the metrics and monitorings. Let's go to Slack channel and continue the discussion there. And thank you very much for everybody to listen us and ask your questions.
Thank you very much. And as you saw, you can find us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Grafana Slack channel.
So, welcome to another ObservabilityCON presentation. This one's going to be about Grafana and also the two products that extend kind of the open source foundation, Grafana Cloud and Enterprise. My name is Torkel Ödegård. I'm one of the co-founders here at Grafana Labs. I'm not going to do that much talking or demoing in this session. I have a ton of great speakers that will do that for me. I just want to introduce the topic a bit and introduce the speakers. So before the first speaker, let's go over some of the things that I talked about in the keynote as well. So Grafana, we see this as this composable observability platform where we give users a ton of choice in terms of what metrics data sources, logs data sources, and trace data sources they use, and the ability to combine these in different ways to gain you more kind of complete observability of the sort of systems and applications that you're observing. And on top of this kind of base platform, we have two more curated, opinionated stacks in Grafana Cloud and Enterprise, where we have kind of a preferred choice for metrics with Prometheus, preferred solution for logs with Loki, and now with traces with Tempo as well. But even with these kind of preferred stack, you still have the power and choice of combining and adding all these different data sources as well. So in this session, we're going to get a taste of all of these three new developments in Grafana with Ivana, who's going to demo kind of new things that we have recently released in the Grafana open source project. Then we'll show how we're using the plugin architecture to build a really compelling easy start experience on Grafana Cloud. Then move over to new developments in Grafana Enterprise with some new data source plugins that can gain you more kind of context to the dashboards you're building. And then finish with how we're building greater observability of Grafana itself through our usage insights features and new auditing feature. So let's get started. Warm welcome to Ivana, who's going to talk about new things in Grafana.
Hello everyone, and thank you Torkel for the introduction. I'm honored to be here today and to have a chance to share with all of you what is new in Grafana. But before we start, there is one more introduction that I would love to make. So everyone, let me introduce you to my avocado monitoring system that I built a couple weeks ago. And today it is going to be one of the main stars of the presentation because I am going to use metrics and logs from this monitoring solution to show you Grafana's newest features and improvements. So what is new in Grafana? I am going to cover three areas. It's platform and visualization, then I will move to explore, and then I will have a brief session on new and improved Grafana data sources. So let's just move directly into Grafana. And I have built this dashboard over here, which is basically a presentation, and I'm going to use it today for all of my demos. And let's just start with the customizable date formats. And customizable date format was one of the most upvoted feature requests on GitHub that we've had. And it totally makes sense because you, Grafana users, are located all around the world, and different parts of the world have different ways how they read and how they write date and time. So one way didn't work the best for all of us, but starting with Grafana 7.3, everyone is now able to customize their date and their time in a way that works the best for them. So as you can see in my dashboard, I have decided to switch to 12-hour format for time instead of 24-hour format that was there before. And for the date, I have decided to switch order of the day and the month, as that is the way how we usually write it in Europe, and it's more natural to read it in that way. If you were one of those people who upvoted this feature request, or if you just think this might be useful for you, definitely check it out. Moving on to color scheme picker. And this feature is going to be especially useful for those of you who use thresholds and who use thresholds to set up background colors of fields based on those thresholds, or just colors of values based on those thresholds. So I have here two tables that look very similarly. They have the same values, very similar colors, but there is one big difference. And the difference is that the table on top was created by using thresholds, and the table on bottom was created by using palette. So for the first table, I had to go to Grafana edit mode, add specific thresholds, assign colors, and this was the final result. For the second table, I went to edit mode again, but I have just picked yellow, red, and green palette from the color scheme picker, and all the calculation was done by Grafana, and Grafana created colors based on the values in the table automatically. Cool thing about this is that, as you can see, colors are continuous, so there is a gradient, and you can see even smaller changes between values. The best thing about this, it literally took me 5 clicks, and I'm going to show it to you right now. So let's go to the edit mode, field. Here is color scheme, and as you can see, we have a lot of different palettes that are applicable for different situation or for different data. For my current data, which is temperature, the green, yellow, red palette is the best, and I'm going to apply it. And easy as that, we don't have to use thresholds. Grafana is doing all the hard work, and we are just enjoying beautiful dashboard. In this dashboard, I have created a couple more panels with different visualization and different palettes, just to show you how this can be applied and different solutions. For my third demo, I am actually going to cover 3 features, which are new ways to override, table image cell, and table column filter. And I just think that they demo really nicely together, and also that's how I usually use them all together. So I'm just going to show you how I usually work with my tables. So let's go to edit mode. And to tell you about new ways to override, I should probably start with what are overrides. So as you can see here, we have table, and if we would go to the field option, there's a lot of options that can be applied across the whole table. However, sometimes you want to apply some of the changes just to specific columns. Mostly if your data are very, if you have a lot of different data in your table. So this is the place where overrides come very handy. And overrides are basically rules, ways how you can target specific columns, specific fields, and apply changes just to those. In the past, we have just override by name. So you had to pick specific column name. And if you wanted to apply override to multiple columns or multiple fields, this wasn't very possible. However, recently we have added 2 more options, which is override by matching regex or by type. And I'm going to show it right now how you can use it as well. So I'm going to use matching regex in combination with the new table image cell. And as you can see, we have here 2 columns with the links to the images. I'm going to create very easy regex that is going to target those 2 columns. And I'm going to change cell display mode to image. And we have images. I mean, 1 image of the plant because I'm monitoring just 1 plant, but we have X for not OK status and check mark for the OK status. Another way how you can override is override fields with type. And in table, we have currently 2 types, numeric fields or columns with numeric data and with string data, string values. So we are going to choose strings, and we are going to apply column filter. And this is going to create option that you can use to filter through that column. If you would like to apply column filter across your whole table, you can just go to field and apply it to your all columns. But in this specific case, all of my strings columns are the ones that I want to filter. So I'm going to apply it just for those. So how can you do ad hoc filtering? Just clicking on the filter icon and choosing the options, as many as you want, and you can see if the filter is applied by the change color. And you can apply as many filters as you want. Let's discard it, and let's move to the last demo related to platform and visualization, and those are new transformations. And I will start again with what transformations are. Transformations is a new powerful feature that was introduced in Grafana 7, and it allows you to work with your data, to transform your data before it reaches the visualization. So you are able to reduce it, merge it, apply filters, do calculations, and so on, and then visualize it in your selected visualization. Why is this so powerful? It's because you are able to run one query and then reuse that result in a lot of other panels where you will apply different transformation and display the result in the different ways that you would like to see it. So specifically, I have here example. I am running in this dashboard one query, which is run in Avocado Raw data table, and then I am using result of that query to create all of these panels. So these panels have two similar or have two common things. First one is that they are using one query, result of one query. The second one is that all of them are using new group by transformation. And let me show you how it works. So we have here reusing result from the Avocado Raw data, as I mentioned. And in transformation, we are using group by transformation. We are grouping by the day, and we are calculating new value. We are calculating average temperature on the top of my plant. With transformation, very important thing is their order. So they are applied one by one. That's why we have added a new drag and drop functionality to all of our transformations. So we wanted to make it as easy as possible for you to move transformations around to basically drop them at the place where you would like them to be dropped. And as we were applying this to transformation, we have decided to apply this also for queries. So now you are able to drag and drop the queries as well. Before there, we used to have these up and down arrow buttons, and you were able to just move the query up or down depending on the button you clicked. And that is all for the platform and visualization, and I'm going to move to Explore. And Explore is very dear topic to me because I am actually developer at Observability Squad, and I work specifically on Explore. And for those who don't know, Explore is part of the Grafana that focuses on monitoring of infrastructure and incident response. And it allows you to dig deeper into your logs, metrics, and traces. And today I'm going to show you these couple of features, but I am very, very happy that I can tell you that the two of those features were actually made by you, by our Grafana community, by amazing developers in Grafana community. And I'm specifically talking about toggle parsed log fields and shared shortened link. But I will get back to them later, and let's just start with Prometheus rate interval and query inspector in Explore. So rate interval variable is a new variable that is meant to be used with rate queries in Prometheus. Deciding on what rate should you use in your rate intervals can be tricky. It's not so super straightforward, and it's actually one of the most frequently asked questions when it comes to the PromQL. we wanted to make it for you easier to run rate queries, and therefore we have created this rate interval variable that you can use, and it's going to ensure that the rate interval is going to be at least 4 times the scrape interval, which is basically the general rule when it comes to the selecting rate. So let me run it. And if you would be interested to figure out what rate interval was actually applied, you can go to the new feature called Query Inspector, which lets you inspect your queries, and it allows you to look into your request and response. So we can go to the request, and we can see that our query was sent with 60-second rate interval. Query Inspector also allows you to look at the stats, query stats. Moving on to logging part of the Explore. And let's start with toggle parsed field, which I mentioned before is the community contribution. And parsed fields in Explore are not a new thing. They have been part of log details view for quite some time, but now you are able to toggle them and to basically just see the fields you are interested in instead of whole log message. So if I would be interested just in humidity, something like a filter is applied to all of my logs and I can see just humidity. You can choose as many parsed fields as you want or as little as you want. If you would like to see all parsed fields, you can just click on the button and you can see original log message. This works for the logs that are in log format or JSON format, and you should definitely try it out. Second thing related to logs is this flip result order button that we've recently added as well. And we have added it because we know that we have users that like to read logs in chronological order. Some of them like to read that other way around. And whichever way you like, you are able to flip it in that way. So you can either flip it to see the oldest on the top or the newest on the top. And shared shortened link, which is feature that was created in cooperation with one of our external contributors as well. This is not Explore specific feature, it's available also in dashboard, but the main benefit comes in Explore, where the links can get very, very long. And that's because we are passing there all query parameters. So the longer your query is, the longer URL is. And I have personally seen links that were 2, 3, 4 characters, 1,000 characters long. And that can really clutter the space. So let me show you just an example of the Explore link. And by clicking on this new button, we create and copy shortened link that is going to be this long. So if we add it to the browser and go to that address, we are then redirected to the original URL that is associated with that shortened link. Again, you can do this also in dashboard. It's available there as well. And that is all for the Explore. And I will be very brief regarding data sources, and I will start with X-ray data source. X-ray data source is actually third tracing data source that we have in Grafana after Zipkin and Jaeger that were added in Grafana 7. And there is going to be a section in the Grafana and tracing dedicated specifically to X-ray data source. So if you are interested in it, definitely check it out on Wednesday in Grafana and tracing. InfluxDB and Flux. So InfluxDB is definitely not the new data source in Grafana. We have had Influx in Grafana for the longest time as an internal data source. And now you are able to use it with InfluxQL, so the older language of Influx, or the Flux, which is the newer language that comes from the Influx. And you can choose whichever you want. You can use them side by side or slowly transition from the older to newer. And the last part of this presentation is ADX Query Editor, so Azure Data Explorer and its new visual query editor. It's dedicated to all ADX users who maybe are not that familiar with Custo query language or are starting with Custo query language. It's definitely going to help them and help all of you to start with it. I personally love visual query editors, mostly for data sources I'm not very familiar with or I'm not using that often, and it really speeds up the process of creating query. And that was the last part of my presentation. And try out Grafana 7.3. We have done beta release. Let us know what do you think. And I'm handing it back to Torkel now. Have a nice day.
Thanks, Ivana, for that cool demo. And I hope your avocado plant stays healthy. Let's continue the show and talk about Grafana Cloud with Juana.
Thank you, Torkel. My name is Juana, and I'm a UX designer in charge of the onboarding experience for Grafana Cloud. Before we begin, I want to ask yourselves, how long do you think it usually takes to have Grafana up and running and seeing your first dashboard? Half an hour? Maybe more? What if you could do it in under 5 minutes? This is all possible with Grafana Cloud, a fast and reliable observability platform which we host, so it's easier for you to get started, no matter if you're a hobbyist, a startup, or a big company. You can test it for free for 30 days, no credit card required. Let's see it in action. Say you just created an account on grafana.com. The first thing you'll see when you log into your new Grafana Cloud instance is our walkthrough guide, the one that I have in front of me. That will help you be up and running in no time. I'm going to start by pressing this button, and then I want to monitor a Linux machine. I'm going to hit next step, and I have some instructions which I have to follow, nothing too complicated. For that, I've opened a terminal window on the right hand side, so I can start copying, pasting these instructions. Let's start with the first one, which will download the binary for the Linux operating system. Depending on your connection speed, this may take up to a few seconds. In the meantime, I can already copy the next command. And as soon as this one is done, I'm gonna paste it. This will unzip the file that I just downloaded. Next one, to make it executable. Second part, set up the agent configuration. Again, copy a larger command this time. And finally, third step, run the agent. This is basically the agent that is collecting the data from your machine. Now, all I have to do is check the connection to see if it's working. And again, something that may take up to 1 minute. All right, looks like everything is working. I'm gonna hit finish setup, and the walkthrough is telling me that my dashboards are ready. And I have even more than dashboards, I have alerts. To see the newly created dashboard, you can go to the sidebar menu, look for the dashboards, and then hit manage. Because I was monitoring a Linux machine, I'm gonna expand the Linux node folder and select the newly created dashboard, which is already collecting data. I let this run a bit in the background for a few seconds so you can see how it looks when it has been collecting something. I'm gonna do the same to see where the alerts are, and also the sidebar menu. Scroll to the Grafana Cloud Alerting, Alerts and Rules, and I'm gonna select what's needed, and here it is. Based on your metrics, you have also alerts. This is a Prometheus style alerting, and if you want to learn more about them, make sure you don't miss the demo my colleague Jess is doing tomorrow on the evolution of Prometheus observability session. What I hope you can remember after this demo is that whether you want to connect to Grafana Cloud using our lightweight agent, your own local Prometheus server, or external services and applications, we want to make it simple for you to get started with Grafana Cloud. And we are continuing to build integrations and pre-bundled dashboards into the onboarding experience, pretty much like you've seen today. To test it yourself, just go to grafana.com and register for a free trial. Now, back to you, Torkel.
Thanks, Rona, for that excellent demo of how easy it is to get started on Grafana Cloud. Let's continue the show and move over to our section on Grafana Enterprise. So we have two excellent speakers here who's going to present on new data sources and new features in Grafana Enterprise. But first, let me kind of explain what Grafana Enterprise is. If you don't know, it's our kind of enhanced version of Grafana that comes with sort of advanced security compliance features, authentication options, search, and collaboration features that allow you to see who else is looking at the same dashboard you are, as well as a whole suite of enterprise data sources. And that's where we'll begin. So yeah, take it over, Stephanie.
Thank you, Torkel. Hello, everyone. My name is Stephanie Clausen, and I'm a developer on our enterprise plugins and integrations team. And I'm going to walk you through some of the plugins we've developed, how you can effectively use them. So let's get started. As always, with more data comes more possibilities. Recently, we've released a Wavefront data source, a Snowflake data source, and under an open source license, we've released a new GitHub data source. And I invite you to check out the GitHub data source as standards continue to evolve to write better plugins. This is an excellent example of writing both a front end and a back end to the latest standards in plugins. Also, our team has been busily writing all of our enterprise plugins with backends using our Go plugin backend SDK, and this allows them all to support alerting. In addition to this, if you have a plugin where you're going to be interacting with an API that may require you setting some sort of a token or setting a cookie, the new Go backend plugin SDK allows you to accomplish this. Now, while more data means more possibilities, this does not always mean that this extra data will yield any insights. Case in point, have you ever looked to find out your fuel mileage, but only when your container CPU utilization is over 50%, while the outside humidity is over 80% and while in REM sleep? I suspect that if you have tried to do this, you didn't learn a whole lot, because none of the data really fits together in telling a data story. So this is why context actually matters, because it actually tells a story that will lead to some insight that affects your company's bottom line, and as Dr. Evil is suggesting, can help you save $1 million. So how do you do this? Well, first you'd ask yourself, what am I trying to learn with this data? And what other data can be supportive? May I suggest that creating a dashboard with perhaps too much data would be better than creating a dashboard with too little, because it will help you to see stories in that data that may be relevant. Now, I'm not suggesting having cluttered dashboards, but when you do have the right question along with the right supporting data, you can create a data context. In this process, may I suggest using the text panel, so that you can write something that will remind other subject matter experts what story you're trying to tell and hone their creativity. And remember that this is a process, but when you use the right context at the right time, you can gain some very valuable insights. So let's get creative with some context. Now, these are all of the plugins that are available to you, published by Grafana, to assist you in creating a context. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. In scenario number 1, a web company is looking at doing a driver rate upgrade. And here's some of the questions that they may have. in establishing creating a dashboard that tells a data story with context. So, for example, what tickets drove the work? And how long did those tickets remain open? How many hours were used in performing the upgrade? This data may be stored in ServiceNow. What was the measurable improvement before and after the driver array was upgraded? This data may be in Wavefront. And can we tie this improvement to something revenue-oriented? Some companies may be charging on web traffic requests. Others may be using a subscription fee. But whatever your company is doing, tying that to some relevant and measurable improvement in revenue will be very important in telling a data story. Let's look at one more. In this example, a company with a taxi fleet is looking to save money by spending less money on gas. Sometimes gas stations further away will have a cheaper price, but is it worth sending the driver there? Well, here's some of the questions you might want to ask yourself. Well, perhaps, where are the locations of those gas stations? How far away are they in relation to the driver? What are the habits of the driver? If a driver has a lead foot and their acceleration curve is, shall we say, expensive, maybe they'll need to go to a closer gas station rather than a further one. Or perhaps if there's 100 stoplights between them and the gas station, it may not be worth it. Let's say that it's exceptionally windy and it's coming toward the driver. You may not want to send a driver into the wind. It just simply may not be valuable. This is another scenario where I may suggest in the future maybe a good one for a machine learning algorithm. But it really starts with creating a dashboard with some context in it and using this data to gain insights. Then, when the time is right, you could throw this at a machine learning algorithm, and then all of a sudden, your drivers are now getting messages saying, we recommend you go to this gas station for gas. So in closing, may I remind everyone that creating a context or contextualization is a process. It does take time, and it's an iterative process. But when you choose the right visualization and present the right data together, it tells a very compelling data story that can help you, that will affect your bottom line. And a reminder that context is a great way to sort of begin a journey towards machine learning. So that's all I have to say. I'd like to hand everything over now to Agnes to present some exciting new features in Grafana Enterprise. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you, Stephanie. So hi everyone, I'm Agnès and I'm working in the Grafana Enterprise team, and I will talk to you about our new features. So you just discovered a lot of new plugins, and maybe you are thinking about all the new dashboards you can build with these. But maybe you are also thinking that there is no way your security team will let you connect your Grafana instance to your Snowflake database that may contain some sensitive information, or that you have already so many dashboards and data sources that it begins to be hard to maintain them and to keep them working. So this is the kind of issues we want to tackle with Grafana Enterprise. So in Grafana Enterprise 7.3, you will have access to audit logs. So audit logs are records of user actions to help you manage and mitigate suspicious activity, meet compliance requirements, and share sensitive information in Grafana with more confidence. So let's see this feature in a demonstration. So first I wanted to show you the setup of this demonstration. So I enabled the auditing feature and I use the Loki logger. So you can decide to send your logs to Loki or to save them into files. If you save them into files, you can then export them to other tools like Splunk or Elasticsearch. So let me show you a dashboard I built with these logs from Loki. So as we are logging important mutating actions, our scope is quite large, from sessions and user information to dashboards, data sources, and even playlist or snapshots managements. So first you can see an overall log count. So you can start to monitor suspicious behavior outside of working hours, for example. Also, I know that there is a lot of customers that are using a limited set of admin accounts. So you can monitor admin activities and check if they are used only when it's required. You also have access to some login informations. So again, you can monitor if there is suspicious login activities outside of working hours, or if there are a lot of failed login actions. So now if you are looking at these two graphs, you can already see a suspicious behavior pattern. So for example, there are a lot of logins that happen during 2 and 3 in the morning, and it corresponds with a spike of failed login. So let's zoom on this graph and switch to Explore View to have more context around this. So let me erase all this query. And now we have all the audit logs that happen during 1 and 4 in the morning. So we found a bunch of failed login actions. So you can see that you have some context information like Grafana version, IP address, and user agent. So all these logs end with a successful login. So we can see that it was our test account that was used. And let's see what it did next. So our next log is a creation of a snapshot. So we can have some request information like the snapshot name and the result information like the snapshot URL. So you also have access to the results that were impacted by this action. Like here, it's a dashboard. So you can now check if the dashboard contains some sensitive information, and you can also decide to delete the snapshot created. So I will stop the demonstration here, but I'm sure you can already see the benefits from this new feature. So now maybe you're also thinking about how to use this data to understand how your Grafana instance is used and what are your users' behaviors. But it's really not our main goal for this feature, and while extending it, we will focus on increasing Grafana security and not observability. However, we are still working on our usage insights features. So for those who don't know, usage insights is a feature that came out with Grafana Enterprise 7.0. And at that time, we focused on dashboard usage insights. So we wanted to answer questions like, is this dashboard used? And who is using it? So in Grafana 7.3, we released similar information around data sources. So data sources usage insights track data sources query count, query duration, and error count to help you understand how data sources are used and to keep them reliable and performant. So let's go back to the demonstration. And let's say that we want to monitor our Loki data source that we use for audit logs. So you have now an Insights tab. And so for example, here, if we didn't have any data here and it wasn't used for the last 30 days, we could decide to delete this data source, for example. But here it's used, and we can see that its usage grew quite a bit during the last days. We can also see that the average load duration grew quite a bit. So then you can start investigate this and check if your server is not overloaded and maybe you need to upgrade it, or if your queries are too complex, or trying to start understand this. So we don't answer all these questions here, but in future versions, we plan to answer more of them. So I hope these features get you excited. And if you are interested by Grafana Enterprise, you can find more information on the Grafana website. So you can discover all its existing features and all its existing plugins. So now back to you, Torkel.
Thanks, Stephanie and Agnes, for those presentations on new developments in Grafana Enterprise. kind of brings us to the end here. We don't have any more presenters or topics. I hope this has kind of allowed you to get more insight into new recent developments in the open source project, what we're doing on cloud and in enterprise. So with that, big thanks to all the speakers, and let's go to questions. Okay, so that was that. Now let's get on to questions. So yeah, now's the time. If you have anything you want to ask about open source Grafana, Grafana Cloud, Enterprise, yeah, take the opportunity and put down your question. So let's see here. Let's see. What is the source for images used in the table? So in the cell. So Ivana, you demoed there the images in the table cell. What's your source data for that?
Yeah, so as you could see, I was using Google Sheets data source, and I had in my image columns basically just link to those images. So it can be URL or path towards the images that you would like to display.
Yeah, and I can add one more thing that also supports if you have a string that contains a base64 encoded image, you can also use that. So basically anything that an image tag source property supports. Let's see, another question here. Does the date and time format supports nanoseconds? And I think I can answer that. It does support nanoseconds for sort of table and log formats and some other, but for the graph tick intervals, it's not. It is supported, might be supported. I'm not 100% sure actually if it will work. But supporting nanoseconds is something that we are really interested in exploring more to sort of have solid support for it in the graph panel. Next is a question, Grafana Cloud question. So if Grafana Cloud is SaaS, how do you deal with data coming from data sources? How do you deal with data coming from data sources? I'm not sure what that question actually. so in Grafana Cloud we have multiple we have agents that you have to install that will send data to our cloud ingestion endpoints. But you can also add data sources in Grafana Cloud that will query your kind of internal or external data sources. You will have to set up so they are publicly accessible from whatever kind of where Grafana will query them. So you can have both kind of where in Grafana Cloud where you query some external data source, or you install an agent and push data to our cloud data sources. Let's see, another question here. I'm new to Grafana. Is there a way to take snapshot of a visualization, example, a heat map or a graph, and save it to a PNG every hour? So there's no kind of built-in scheduler for taking snapshots, but there is a feature in Grafana that allows you to take so either save an image, a PNG panel to an image. So you could easily write maybe a script that uses that API that will capture an image of a panel. So if you go to the share menu on the panel, you can access, or the share modal, you can access a link there that will where Grafana will actually render the panel to an image on the server. Someone asking how's the plant doing?
So plant is doing good, as you can see. Actually, I have one more avocado that is not in the monitoring system, and that one is not doing that well. So it definitely pays off, this Grafana Hack Day project.
So another question for the table panel with the filtering thing you showed, Ivana. Can you specify a range?
So in the filter that I was showing, no, unfortunately. But yeah, maybe you can tell more about how you can do it.
No, it's currently it's only you can filter only by kind of the existing values in that field or column.
But that's definitely a good feature request.
Yeah. So another Grafana Cloud question here on sort of, is there a way to get that Linux dashboard that you set up? So if you're sort of not using Grafana Cloud or?
That's actually a great question. And we have, let's say, a workaround. It's not something official, but if you want, you can definitely take the JSON from the Grafana Cloud Linux dashboard and use it. You'll have to go on GitHub on Prometheus, and there's Node Explorer, and you have to search for the node mixin, and I think you can generate it yourself from there.
Yeah. So I think they are open source at least, so it's not something we. So and we'll try to work around how to make these more accessible. So the whole point of exciting point of these dashboards that you can get sort of pre-installed and help get up and running on Grafana Cloud is that we want to engage the community in kind of building these and maintaining them and getting new ones as well. So they're the open source community aspect of them is going to be really big, we hope. Another question here. For shortened URLs, how long are these stored, Joanna?
Yes, so for shortened URLs, we are planning to store basically a timestamp when the URL was lastly used. And we haven't decided on exact time frame that we want to keep them from, but we definitely want to make sure that if the URL is used, we don't delete it and decide on and rather delete those ones that aren't. So no time frame set yet, but we are in a process of discussing what should be the ideal one.
Yeah, someone is also asking if they can get the link to your dashboard. Maybe something you can create a gist for. Let's see here. I'm trying to find an enterprise question, but let's see. When will to? Okay, so it's a question around the support for PromQL for Elasticsearch. So that's not something we support right now, but we are we are going to invest more in the Elasticsearch data source. So we have sort of a lot of things kind of planned for that. I think SQL might be the first first to be added to the Elasticsearch data source. Let's see here if we can find some more questions here. So I'm looking for a PHP weather map replacement for years. Do you have any plans to create something similar? So yeah, we have also had sort of been discussing a weather map panel for years as well internally, and it's improving Grafana for network monitoring use cases is something that we're really interested in sort of exploring. So and the weather map is on the top of the list for those use cases. So I can't tell you when, but it's I would love to see kind of a core supported Grafana weather map panel and other improvements for network monitoring. Where is the enterprise usage insights data stored in the Grafana SQL store or in external data sources, for example, Prometheus? Agnes?
Yeah, it's in the Grafana database, like the other data.
Yeah, so the usage insights as it's stored right now is heavily rolled up. So even though Grafana just has a SQL database, the granularity is really kind of low and we have cleanup. So it's that's why we can kind of use Grafana, the Grafana's internal database. But I think moving forward, so in Grafana Enterprise, if you have Cortex Enterprise, there might be so we might use that as a sort of high resolution on long-term storage for some of these usage insights in the future. But for now, you don't need you don't need another data source for this data. Let's see. As far as I know, Grafana has an internal database. Is there a way to clean it up so that it doesn't overflow? Well, Grafana's does have internal cleanup processes that will clean up everything that should be cleaned up. I think there are even for annotation events. So there shouldn't be anything that sort of goes too exponentially, except if you have something that creates an infinite amount of dashboards, I don't think we have cleanup for that. We have cleanup for dashboard versions and other things that kind of are continuously generated. But if you have something that you want us to add more cleanup for, let us know. Let's see. In case of transformations for Prometheus metrics, can we do query from a different data source and then generate output from a UI? So I'm not sure exactly what this question is getting at, but what you can do with transformations is you can query different Prometheus servers and then aggregate or combine the result using a transformation. But you have to use the mixed data source in order to sort of add queries that target different data sources. So let's see. We might have a chance for one more question. We're right at the edge here of our allotted time. Is there a way to add Cassandra for Azure Data Lake as a source in Grafana? Not that I know. Are you working streaming data sources, example, GraphQL subscription, GPRC subscription, or Signal R? We are working for a streaming kind of built-in capability in Grafana, so you can stream, push data to Grafana's API, and it will push, so you can stream, have basically a streaming setup built into Grafana. We're also looking at how to support that with custom data sources using gRPC. Okay, well, I think we're at the end now. Thanks so much for all the questions. I'm going to go to the Slack channel, so if you have more questions, I hope some of the other speakers here will also join me in answering some more questions there. But yeah, thanks for this.
Hello, everyone. I'm Parveen Khan, and I'm a senior test engineer at Square Mobile Technology, which is based in London, UK. I'm a quality advocate, and what that means is I collaborate with the teams and try to optimize the processes, tools, and approaches so that it can enable in creation of high quality products. So today, I'm going to share my experience and talk about um, a peek into observability from tester's lens. So there might be a lot of you all who already know a lot about observability who has joined today's session, or maybe there are a few people who are new to this. So maybe a lot of you all are from different backgrounds, like maybe ops, system admins, or maybe devs, or SREs, or maybe someone from management background, or maybe someone testers like me. So let's start with this. What is the one thing that I'm looking forward to most after COVID? I really, really am looking forward to travel without any fear and meet my family. Really, this is one of the things which I'm really looking forward. Once almost if this COVID is finished, then I really want to do this. So before even jumping onto this topic, I really want to quickly take you through a simple scenario, and the credit for this scenario goes to Pierre Vincent. So imagine, what would you do if you come across this kind of a foggy road while you are driving in a weird weather condition? So what comes in your mind? So one thing that comes into our mind is that we need to slow down, right? But why do we need to slow down? So it's because we don't have any visibility of what's ahead of us, and we consciously make this decision based on the risk, right? So if we are not able to drive, does that mean that we are bad drivers, that we cannot drive fast enough on a foggy road? Not at all, right? In fact, we are good drivers because we are kind of making decision based on risk. Does that mean that the car isn't good enough to drive faster? No, right? Our cars can drive much faster, but we just hold them back because we know it's bad to drive when there's no visibility. So basically, we are ultimately stuck. But how about these planes? They all the time fly among the clouds, right? But how are they able to do that? It's because pilots have additional instruments to do that, and they do not have to solely rely on their eyes. So what is it, this whole scenario and example to do with the software development? So we all know that the current trends is all about going faster, and it's all about trying to deliver value quickly by maybe adopting agile, maybe by moving into DevOps, or maybe trying to move into microservices or distributed systems. So by doing this, all we're trying to do is building faster cars. So we the reason why we are moving into maybe distributed systems or microservices architecture is to it's because so that we can have simplicity of development, right? But on the other hand, there's a lot of complexity, and there are multiple moving parts, which means that it's even more complex, which means that when we are distributing the system, we are also distributing the places where things might go wrong. So we know that we need visibility, but how can we get the visibility into the system? So the answer to this is by having observability. Before going ahead in trying to understand what observability is, let's first try to understand why do we need it in first place. So like always, I always look for real life examples to understand any given concept, and I kind of don't get convinced by just reading through or by just going through the theoretical concepts. So I would really love to share my real world experience with you all of how I came to an understanding of why we need observability. So I joined a new team, and the entire team was new. It was a great opportunity to join this team and work on a really exciting and interesting product. So it was based on a microservice architecture. And the work we as a team were doing was to build new features and fix the bugs. So as a tester, when we start working on a new product or a system, the first thing we try to do is try and understand the product. So similarly, when I joined this, I was trying to understand the system. I was trying to understand how it works, what it is all about, what is how things work on this product. So while I was doing that, the more I was trying to learn about the product, I was feeling like, oh, it's too complex. It's not just that, but another reason to feel this way was that I have seen a pattern for a lot of tickets being marked as blocked. So I used to see a lot of production issues each day, and the developers would pick up and investigate to find the root cause. They used to spend maybe a few days and maybe a week or so, and then mark it as blocked, as they did not have any information about why it was causing an issue or where. Sounds familiar, anyone? So that really made me think about what's wrong here. Like at that point, I stopped thinking that the product is complex as an excuse. I thought it's really, I'm using the complexity as an excuse basically. So interestingly, at the same time, I was trying to read a lot about observability without knowing when and where it's being used or how it can be used. So not just reading, but I was trying to use different tools that promise to deliver observability to see what it brings. So having a conversation with at that point, having a conversation with one of my team member where I was trying to share what I was trying to learn and what I came across this new term. Uh, that team member was a developer, so that conversation gave me a food for thought. Like that is what we. So it gave me like, oh, this is what we are missing on our product, and that's observability. That conversation was like a light bulb moment for me because that unlocked few of the answers to few of the questions, but of course it did open up a lot of questions too. So I got an answer that we had very less or no visibility into our system, which is why a lot of issues were marked as blocked, as the developers could not debug them. And because they could not debug those issues, they could not find the root cause. So I keep talking about observability. Now let's look into what it is. So there you can find quite a lot of different definitions if you try to Google, but this one, I go with this simple one. So what observability means is observability is a measure of how well internal states of a system can be inferred from its external output. So it means that you can answer any questions about what's happening on the inside of the system just by observing the outside of the system, and without having to without having to ship any new code to answer those new questions. So whenever the systems are down, we all need to find answers by asking questions as quickly as possible. So so the system needs to be observable so that it can explain what's happening, so that we can find out what's happening on the inside of the system by just observing from the outside. But how can we make the system observable? The answer is by using the data. Now, how can we get the data, and what type of data do we need to have a observable system? We can get the data to make the system observable by adding instrumentation, and that instrumentation can give us the data that can be in the form of logs or traces or metrics. And this is how you can make use of this data and make the system more observable. So now let's talk each of these in a little bit of detail. So first is logs. A log is a message basically. It's a simple message which has some kind of information. It might have something like, okay, a timestamp and some kind of payload which that helps you give more context. So it's a simple piece of information. So again, logs can be, we should have logs those that are centralized, and that we should have logs that are structured logs, and those which are easily searchable. So let's look one of the example. Like for example, if we are talking about distributed system, we do not want to get into each different service and try to look at the logs. So rather than having to look at different places, we should have them at centralized one place so that it's easier for us. So on my current team, we used to have logs which was stored separately for each service in a folder basically. We used nlog, and to access those logs, we had to access those separately for each service, and only way to view those logs was to open that up in a Notepad++ basically. So whenever there used to be an issue, we would end up having multiple Notepad++ tabs, and it was really painful. So to add to that, the only way we could search for those logs was by using Control F. Can you imagine the pain? So this is the reason why logs should be easily searchable, and the way we can make it easily searchable is by having structured logs. And having these easily searchable and structured logs in one place makes it even much more easier and effective to use this data. So let's quickly look into metrics. So a metric could be could give you any kind of information. It could be any kind of value that could be about your system. It could be like systems metric, it could be an application metric, or it could be a business metric. So these it can have some kind of maybe name, a time, and a value. So it can be represented as different counts or different measures over a period of time. It could be representing like maybe for a day, for a month, or for a week or something. So for example, a system metric can tell you how much memory is being used by a process in total, and an application metric can show the number of requests per second, and maybe a business metric could tell you something like how long does it take for a user to log in. So it could be different metrics about the system. And metrics are really good at pointing at specific details, something like, okay, at this specific time this customer had some kind of problem. So now let's look at traces. What are traces? Traces is kind of like it's kind of a telling you a story, which kind of gives you more level of details. So it is like it shows the entire flow of the request, and I think it's kind of really valuable when we are trying to debug any kind of issue. So a single trace shows the activity for an individual maybe transaction, or maybe you can say a request or an event as it flows through the application. So it kind of shows an end-to-end request. So I feel like traces are really critical part of observability, as they kind of provide the detailed context. So okay, so I've been saying that, okay, with observability we can ask any kind of questions, but what kind of questions can we ask? So it could be any kind of question, like you can start by asking question to find out the answers. It could be, you can ask that, oh, why is my service broken? Or you can ask like, okay, what are these service, what are the different services my service is dependent on? Or what went wrong during this release? Or you can say, why has the performance degraded over the past week or so? Or you can say like, how did my service look like at point X? So it could be any kind of question. So that's where you can start building a question about the system, and that's where you can start looking at the answers by looking at any kind of data which you make available. So just like how we talk about DevOps, we cannot say that we are doing DevOps by just having some automated tool in place. Like if you say, like if you're using Jenkins, you cannot say that you are using DevOps, right? Or you are working in DevOps. It's more than tools, right? It is more like it's a more cultural and mindset change. Similarly, we cannot say that we are having observability by just having some different tools in place. It's not just about getting the tools and sending some data and trying to observe it, but it's more about cultural change and the mindset change. So now coming to the point, now you might be thinking like, what's in for testers with all this observability, and how can testers make use of this tool, or how can it help testers? So for example, while we are testing, we might see a lot of maybe unexpected behavior, or maybe we see some kind of failures, right? Having these kind of tools in place and having access to these kind of tools allows testers to look under the hood to find out what's happening with each of those requests. And it's just not that, but it also allows us to learn more about the system and of how it is communicating and how it is working under the hood. And like for example, when I'm testing, if I don't have access to these tools, maybe I might use dev tools to see when something is going wrong, or when something didn't look right to me. So but I wouldn't get enough information. So having these kind of tools and having access to these kind of tools helps me in getting more information that can be again added to the tickets while I'm raising any issue, while testers are raising any kind of issue, which might be again helpful for the developers. So it's not just about finding the information while looking into the issues, but also it could help us uncover a lot of understanding about our system, about our product. And it is a tool for exploring and asking questions. Testers are really curious explorers and great at asking questions. So as a tester, I really tend to ask a lot of questions when I don't understand things. So they are great at exploratory testing, not just good at asking questions, but the testers are always curious to find information about the system. While exploring the logs and metrics, testers might point out where more instrumentation is needed or where some more information is needed, and that's where you can add more logs or metrics. And not just that, but it also supports and helps testers for for testing in production. So it's like it allows teams not just to shift left but shift right. I really like this tweet which Marit has tweeted, which explains very well that a lot of times good debugging and good exploratory testing are indistinguishable. When a developer explores, they call it more often debugging, and whether they know where this problem is or they just suspect, so there could be a problem. Similarly, a tester does, while a tester is exploring the system, it's not about just trying to find the problem, or it's about trying to understand the system as well. So to summarize, as we know that by making systems observable, anyone on the team can easily navigate from effect to the cause into the production system. It makes it much easier to debug. And the goal of observability is not just to collect logs, metrics, and traces, but also using that data to get the feedback. So it just doesn't allow us to find knowns of the system, but also allows us to find out and know the unknown unknowns. So every learning experience and every journey has something to take away, right? Similarly, I too had some kind of key takeaway out of this learning experience. The key takeaway, so thinking outside the box. So the key takeaway for me is that we testers can go out of the way. We care and we advocate about quality, and that could be related to it could be related to bringing in improvements, maybe in the process, maybe bringing in new tools related to test automation, but that's not the limit. I learned that we do not have to limit ourselves and say that this is not related to testing, so let's not look into it or let's not learn about it. So I saw the problems with my team was going through, like developers getting frustrated when they could not resolve production issues, and product owners getting frustrated answering the clients with not enough information related to those production issues. So I didn't knew the answer or solution to it, but being active in the community and seeing new tools and concepts and exploring them and finding the finding the solution and trying out myself using open source tools, and then presenting them to my team as a suggestion. So it's about not limiting myself to testing tools only, and trying to think outside the box was helpful to my team. So we as a team are not there yet in terms of observability implementation, but we started our steps into it, our smaller steps into it. So from having no visibility to now having structured and centralized logs that can easily be queried. So this is where we are, and we are still we still have a lot to go. So to end with, I would like to say that observability gives power to the entire team to get the visibility when needed, and observability is much more powerful when you apply with the right mindset and clear kind of process and tools. It allows the team to become more proactive towards the issues rather than being reactive, and it's kind of give the power to everyone on the team, whether it's developers, ops engineers, SREs, or testers. If there's one thing that you can take away from my talk today, then I would want you all to take away this. So we all believe in diversity, and having diversity means building powerful solutions, right? Then why not have diverse roles like maybe developers, testers, ops, or SREs or system admins, while building these kind of solutions within your team, while building observability on the system. So thank you so much for joining my session today, and thank you ObservabilityCON for having me to share my experience. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have. And be sure to check out my blog site, perveenkhans.com, and follow me on Twitter at perveen_khan10. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining my session. For everyone who's been watching this, so I'll take up the questions, and so the first one I'll go for with is what. It's from Richard. What will you say is a well-structured log output? I think from my point of view, it's more of like when it's giving you the context behind, it's giving you information. Like, for example, if it's giving you timestamp, like for example, for us, so ours is a multi-tenancy product. So we have a lot of different like clients. So for us, it was more like, okay, is it giving us a timestamp? Is it giving me a correct, good info? Like it's not something like, oh, something went wrong. It's not that kind of message, but a good detailed message. And maybe where that log is coming from which client that is coming from, or some kind of build ID, or like which version it is coming from. So this would be, for me, this would be like a simple structured log. So yeah, so this would be my answer for that. And the next question would be, has adopting observability changed any of your approaches to testing? Like what kind of test you run, or what toolings you use? I think approach wise, yes, because I think it does help a lot. Like, for example, like when I'm testing something, if I don't have anything to look, like if I don't have access to the logs, or if I don't have anything, any traces, any access to the traces or anything like that. So when I'm testing, I might like just report some issue which is not an issue as well. Like it might be something to do with how things are going wrong. But if I'm having access to the logs, then I get more information. And I think the more I'm trying to look at the system, look at the logs, my test approach more is like, okay, it also allows me to find the risk of the system, understand the product, and also it's like it is giving me a good context behind what's under the hood, like basically. So I think tools wise, nothing to do of how it has changed from the tools for my testing itself, but approach wise, yes, it has changed in a way that I get more information, I can log more information. And I think it kind of helped me, like, having giving that information while I'm having conversations with the developers, or trying to improve the logs while seeing something is not when something is going wrong. Oh, I think it is logging only this enough information, it's not logging much more. So I think this gives more my approach more was to do with getting the context and understanding and adding more information while I'm raising the issues, or like it is kind of a little bit more shifting left kind of thing. And also like if I'm looking something on production, like not exactly, we're not doing any testing in production right now, but if I'm looking something on production, like we have those logs, so I can see what users are using. Like it's kind of giving me some kind of analytics, I think I can say. And it's giving me context of what kind of errors people are facing a lot, which is the least so these are the different type of context it's giving me. And again, these are the different information which gives me input, and then based on that I can try to improve my designs of the test. I can try to improve my test, what I have, for maybe it could be something for exploratory or for test automation. So yeah, this is how a little bit of things have changed for me while having observability. So the next question is, what was your career path like to becoming a test engineer? Good question. So my career path was like, okay, it was very, I didn't get into testing straight away, but it was more of like, I was a university lecturer first, and then I became a test engineer. I started learning about it, and I really like kind of I liked how things work, and I like how to build, like it's more of like users advocates. So this is the main part which I like about. So that's where since then, like yeah, it's been like 6+ years now, and I've been into testing. So yeah, this is my career path. The next question is, any suggestions you could give in talking to devs about improving the logs? Yeah. So yeah, definitely, like the way I try to have conversations is like, for example, when I'm trying to do some testing, or when I'm trying to figure out some answers while I'm testing. I think when I'm looking at the log, if I don't get that information, that's where I think I try to have conversation with my developers. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. Other day I was trying to test something, and there were a lot of issues from different there were a lot of issues which I was not able to understand, and the logs were not very clear. So I wanted to know what kind of browsers each of those logs is coming from, or which kind of place the user is from. So by by asking those kind of questions, because that's my need, like I needed those answers. So by having so I can have conversation with the developers and say, this is the reason why I want this information to be added to the log, so that I can do this. So it's like not trying to just say like, oh, I just need extra information from this log, but trying to articulate that, like what kind of information do you need, and how are you going to use it, like how does it make more valuable. So by having those kind of conversations and providing the value of adding that information onto the logs, like this is how I try to do it. So this is one of the things I can suggest. So the next question is, what are some of the most used tools to support your observability needs? So as I mentioned in my talk as well, so we are not we have just started into our first steps, right? So right now we are using Azure mostly. We are mostly .NET house, so we are using that. So even that has a lot of capability of providing everything, all the context in one place. So we are trying to we are in a phase where we are trying to evaluate different tools basically. So but we are using Azure App Insights, which has a good amount of like traces and metrics and monitoring. and everything in one place. So I think that we are using that tool. And again, it is something to say that we did not want to start having good tool in place first without knowing how to use it. So we want to start from the basics. So that's why we're using what we have in-house. So I think the time is up, but I'm happy to continue this conversation over the Slack and answer all those questions to and have yeah, and yeah, you can follow me on Twitter, or you can ask me those questions as well. So yeah, thank you so much.